10 years after our divorce, my ex-wife knocked on my door at 11 p.m. and whispered something so quietly it hit me louder than the divorce ever did. I've nowhere else to go. I am Caleb Merritt, 42 years old, architect, a man who rebuilt his entire life, brick by brick, silence by silence. After the divorce that nearly took everything from me, I had a beautiful home, a thriving firm, a life that looked whole from the outside. I had finally stopped waiting for a knock that I told myself would never come. But there she was, my ex-wife, standing at the very door she had once walked out of 10 years ago, with a suitcase in one hand and another man's promises in her heart. Now she was back at that same door, soaked from the rain, one suitcase at her feet, no ring on her finger, and the only thing left of the pride I remembered in her eyes was the quiet, breaking courage it took to whisper those words. I hadn't heard her voice in 10 years, but somehow it still sounded like home. I stood there frozen, my hand on the door, 10 years of silence pressing against my chest like a held breath, and every question I had buried came rushing back at once. What happened to her? What did those 10 years do to the woman who left me? But the question that scared me most, the one I wasn't ready to answer, was this. Why, with nowhere else to go, did she come back to my door? Because what she whispered next, what she told me in the hours that followed that 11 p.m. knock, was a truth so painful, so raw, and so heartbreakingly human that it didn't just change how I saw her. It changed how I saw everything. And if you think you already know where this story goes, trust me, you don't. The rain was not heavy. It was the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just soaks you slowly, the way grief does, until you realize you're completely drenched and can't remember when it started. Nadia's hair was flattened against her face. Her jacket, a thin beige thing, completely wrong for the weather, clung to her shoulders. She had a small cut above her right eyebrow that she clearly hoped I wouldn't notice. I noticed it immediately, but I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We just stood there. Two people with an entire collapsed marriage between us, staring at each other across a doorstep that had once belonged to both of us. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Something else. Something behind her eyes. The fire that used to make Nadia Holloway the most magnetic person in any room. That specific brightness she carried like a second skin. It was gone. Not dimmed. Gone. And in its place was something I recognized immediately, because I had worn it myself once. Defeat. My jaw tightened. I felt something move in my chest. Something I had sealed away behind years of early mornings, late nights, and the deliberate business of building a life that didn't need anyone in it. I didn't want to feel it, but I felt it. Nadia. Her name came out of me like something I'd been holding underwater. She lifted her chin slightly, just slightly, and I saw it. That stubborn, beautiful reflex she could never quite kill, even now. Even like this, she was still fighting to stand straight. I know, she said quietly. I know I have no right to be here. She paused, swallowed. I tried everywhere else first. Those 5 words hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. Not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. Raw and unpolished and completely true. She wasn't here because she wanted to be. She was here because every other door had already closed. And somehow, that hurt more than if she'd said she missed me. I looked past her shoulder at the street. Her car, if she still had one, was not there. Just the rain. Just the wet pavement, catching the amber light of the street lamp. Just her suitcase, which I now noticed had a broken wheel, tilted sideways on my porch step like it too had given up. 10 years. 10 years ago, I stood in this same spot and watched her load that same suitcase, or one like it, into Derek's car. I remembered the exact sound of that car door closing. I remembered standing here, hands still on this door frame, telling myself not to call after her. I didn't call after her. And for 3 years after that, I wondered every single day if that silence was the biggest mistake of my life. But I had healed. I had actually healed. Therapy. Work time doctor. Harlan Wade, my old professor and neighbor, the wisest man I'd ever known, sitting with me on his porch on Sunday evenings, saying things like, "Caleb, Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a prison you unlock for yourself. I had done the work. I had forgiven her. Quietly, privately, without an audience. I was not supposed to be standing here feeling like this. And yet, how long have you been outside? I asked. She hesitated. A while, a while. I repeated it slowly. She nodded. Just once. I looked at the cut above her eyebrow again. What happened to your face? Her hand moved instinctively to touch it, then stopped halfway, like she'd caught herself. She lowered her hand and looked at me with an expression I had never once seen on Nadia Holloway in the 8 years we were married. Shame. Pure, devastating, quiet shame. She didn't answer, and that non-answer told me more than any sentence could have. Something cold moved through my whole body. I stepped back from the door, not away from her, to make room. Come inside, I said. She didn't move immediately. She blinked. Like she hadn't expected it, like she'd already prepared herself for the door to close. And maybe that was the most heartbreaking thing I'd seen all night, that she had shown up anyway, knowing I might say no. She picked up her suitcase, broken wheel and all, and walked through my door. And just like that, 10 years of silence ended. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, standing there watching her step into the warmth of my home, was that the knock at the door wasn't the beginning of her crisis. It was the end of one, and what was coming next would test everything I thought I knew about love, about forgiveness, about the kind of person I had worked a decade to become. The door clicked shut behind her, and the real story, our real story, finally began. She stood in the middle of my living room, like she was afraid to take up too much space. That was the first thing I noticed. Nadia, the woman who used to walk into rooms like she owned them, like the air itself rearranged to make way for her, was standing in my home with her arms slightly folded, her wet jacket still on, her eyes moving carefully across the walls, like a guest, like a stranger, like someone who no longer believed she deserved to be comfortable anywhere. You can sit down, I said. I'm wet, I'll ruin the couch. Nadia, sit down, she sat. I went to the hall closet and pulled out a towel. The big gray one Theo always complained was too soft to actually dry anything. I came back and held it out to her. She took it without meeting my eyes and pressed it to her hair. I went to the kitchen. My hands moved on their own. Kettle, mugs, the chamomile tea I never actually drank but kept in the cabinet anyway. I stood at the counter with my back to the living room and I breathed, just breathed, in through the nose, slow, the way Dr. Wade had taught me years ago when the world got too loud inside my head. You are not that man anymore, I told myself. The one who fell apart. You are not him. But my hands were not entirely steady. I put 2 mugs on a tray and walked back in. She had taken off her jacket, folded it neatly on the arm of the couch, despite it being soaked. Her hair was still damp, but she'd pulled it back with a hair tie she must have had on her wrist. And now, in the warm light of my living room, I could see her properly for the first time. She was still beautiful. I hated that I noticed. I noticed anyway. But underneath the beauty was something that made my throat tighten. She was thin. Not healthy thin. The kind of thin that comes from skipping meals you can't afford. Her hands, wrapped around the mug I handed her, had a faint tremor that she was working very hard to hide. I sat across from her. Not beside her. Across. I needed the distance. The clock on the wall said 11:31 p.m. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The rain tapped gently against the window. The kettle's heat still hung in the air between us, warm and quiet. The cut on your eyebrow, I said finally. Tell me what happened. She looked up. It's not what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything. I'm asking. She looked down at her mug, turned it slowly in both hands. I was staying at a motel. One of those places near the highway where the carpets haven't been replaced since 1987. The bathroom door swung back and caught me. She gave a small, humorless smile. Glamorous life. I didn't smile back. How long have you been in a motel? 3 weeks. And before that? A pause. Simone's couch. For about 10 days. She shifted slightly, and before that, my own home. Until it wasn't mine anymore. I watched her face as she said it. She kept her expression flat and controlled, but her jaw moved just slightly. the way it used to when she was fighting something back. Nadia. I kept my voice quiet. What did he do? And there it was. The question she had been bracing for since she knocked on my door. I saw it move through her. A long, slow shudder, starting somewhere behind her eyes and rolling down through her whole body until her shoulders dropped, just slightly, just barely, under the weight of what she was about to say. Everything looked fine, she started. For years, Caleb. Everything looked fine. Her voice was steady but thin. Derek was charming and successful, and I thought. She stopped. Started again. I thought I had made the right choice. She looked up at me when she said it, and I held her gaze, because she needed me to, because looking away would have been cruel, and I had promised myself, years ago, that I would not become a cruel man no matter what life handed me. But he was lying, she said. About everything. The business, the investments, the money we were building together. He was moving it, slowly, quietly, for years, Caleb. I had no idea. I trusted him completely, and he was emptying everything while I was. Her voice broke then. Just once. She caught it fast, pressed her lips together, breathed, while I was planning our future. The room felt very still. He left 8 weeks ago, she continued. Just gone. No note, no call. Cleaned the joint accounts the night before. The house. It was mortgaged against a business loan I didn't even know existed. They came for it 3 weeks later. She set the mug down. Her hands were shaking now, and she wasn't hiding it anymore. I had $47, Caleb. $47 in a suitcase, she laughed. It was the saddest laugh I had ever heard. I called my aunt in Michigan. She's sick. I couldn't put that on her. I called 3 friends. 2 didn't answer. 1 answered and said she'd call back. A beat. She didn't call back. She looked at her hands. I sat in that motel room for 3 weeks, applying for jobs I'm overqualified for and being told I'm overqualified. And tonight she exhaled slowly. I ran out of road. Silence. The clock ticked. The rain kept going. I sat with everything she'd just handed me. 10 years of a life she'd chosen without me, collapsing into this one quiet sentence. I ran out of road. I wanted to be unmoved. I had rehearsed being unmoved, not consciously, but in the way you unconsciously prepare for things you tell yourself will never happen. I had imagined in weaker moments what I would say if I ever saw her again. Cool, measured, unbothered. But there is no rehearsal for watching someone you once loved describe the exact shape of their destruction. Why didn't you call? I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. She looked at me. Because I left you, Caleb. She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because I chose him over you, and I have carried that for 10 years and I couldn't. She stopped, pressed her fingers to her lips for a moment. I couldn't call you and ask for help. It felt like the cruelest thing I could do to you. But you knocked on my door. Yes, at 11 p.m. Yes. Her eyes were glassy now, but she still hadn't cried. Still fighting. Still Nadia underneath all the damage. Why? I asked. She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. And then she said the thing that split my chest, completely open. Because you were always the safest person I ever knew. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. And I know I gave up the right to say that. I know that. But it's true, and I had nowhere left to lie to myself about it. I looked at her for a long time, the safest person she ever knew. She had left that. She had looked at safe, at real, steady, quiet love, and walked away from it for excitement and promise and a man who turned out to be smoke and mirrors. And now she was back, not with grand speeches, not with declarations, just with the truth, worn down to its last raw edge. My phone buzzed on the side table. Theo, you awake? Random question, you okay? Theo had a gift for sensing things, always had. I set the phone face down. I stood up slowly and walked to the window, looked out at the wet street, thought about all the nights I had stood at this same window, in this same silence, in the years after she left. Thought about the version of me that would have turned her away tonight. Rightfully, justifiably, with every good reason in the world. Then I thought about Dr. Wade's porch. Sunday evenings, his slow, gravel voice. Caleb, the strongest thing a man can do is choose grace when he has every right to choose bitterness. I turned back to face her. There's a guest room at the end of the hall, I said. Second door on the left. Clean towels in the cabinet beside the shower. I'll find you something dry to sleep in. She stared at me. Caleb, we can talk more tomorrow. Tonight you need to sleep. Her mouth opened slightly. Closed. She blinked. And for just 1 second, just one, the armor cracked completely. One tear. Only one. She caught it, almost immediately, with the back of her hand. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded once and walked down the hallway to find her something warm to wear. And as I stood in my closet, holding an old college sweatshirt with slightly shaking hands, I made myself ask the question I'd been avoiding since the moment she stepped through my door. What am I doing? Because letting her in for the night was one thing, but the way my chest felt when she said the safest person I ever knew, that was something else entirely. And I knew, with the certainty of a man who had already survived her once, that if I wasn't careful, I was standing at the exact edge of something I might not survive again. The question was whether I was brave enough to step forward anyway, or whether this time I would be the one who walked away. She was already awake when I came downstairs. I didn't expect that. I had imagined her sleeping late, recovering, healing, doing whatever the body does when it finally feels safe enough to rest. But at 6:47 in the morning, Nadia Holloway was sitting at my kitchen table in my old college sweatshirt, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she had made herself, watching the early light come through the window like it was something she hadn't seen in a very long time. She looked up when she heard me. I hope that's okay, she said, nodding at the coffee. I found the grounds in the cabinet. It's fine, I said. I poured myself a cup and sat across from her, and that was how it started. Not with a grand conversation. Not with speeches or resolutions or promises. Just two people and 2 mugs of coffee in a quiet kitchen while the world slowly woke up outside. Small, ordinary, fragile. The most real thing I had felt in years. She stayed. Not because I asked her to. I didn't ask. But 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. And every morning she was at that table before me. Coffee already made. And every evening she helped clear the dishes, even when I told her not to bother. She started cooking on day 4. Nothing fancy, just the kind of food that fills a kitchen with warmth. Soup, rice, grilled chicken that smelled so familiar, it physically stopped me in my tracks the first time I came home to it. She applied for jobs every single day. I watched her from across the room, sitting straight back at the dining table, with her laptop and her notepad, writing cover letters with the focused intensity of someone who had decided, quietly and without announcement, that she was going to fight her way back. No complaints, no self-pity, just work. On day 9, Theo came over. He walked in, saw Nadia at the table, and stopped so completely he looked like a cartoon. Nadia. He said her name like he was confirming something to himself. Hello, Theo, she said simply. He looked at me. I gave him nothing. He sat down, accepted the coffee Nadia offered him, and for a full 4 minutes, Theo Bancroft, the man who had never been quiet for 4 consecutive minutes in his entire life, said absolutely nothing. Then he picked up his mug and said, "This is really good coffee." Nadia almost smiled. Thank you, that was all. But later, when she stepped out to take a call from a recruiter, Theo turned to me with an expression I had never quite seen on him before. Not the usual smirk, not the teasing. Something more careful than that. You doing okay? He asked. I'm fine, Caleb. I said, I'm fine, Theo. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, and said, She looks like she's been through hell. She has. And you took her in. She needed somewhere to go. He was quiet again. Then, very quietly, You still love her, don't you? It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. He nodded again, picked up his mug. Okay, he said simply, and that was the end of it. But the words stayed in the room long after he left. Love. I turned it over in my mind for days, like something I'd found, and wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. It was on a Sunday, 2.5 weeks after she knocked on my door, that everything shifted. I had gone next door to see Dr. Wade, the way I always did on Sunday evenings. He was in his usual chair on the porch, a blanket across his knees, a cup of something warm in his hand. 87 years old and still the sharpest mind I'd ever encountered. "She still there?" he asked before I even sat down. "Yes, sir." "Good." I looked at him. "You don't even know what happened between us." "I know enough." He took a slow sip. "I know you're sitting on my porch on a Sunday evening instead of on your porch with her, which means you're thinking too hard again." I exhaled. "She left me, Harlan." "She did. She chose someone else. She did that too. And now I'm supposed to just—" "Nobody said anything about supposed to," he said gently. "I'm asking what you want. Not what's logical. Not what's safe. What do you want, Caleb?" The question sat in the cool evening air between us. A bird somewhere in the oak tree above us called once and went quiet. And I heard myself say out loud for the first time, "I want her to stay." Dr. Wade looked out at the street. "Then go home," he said simply, "and stop punishing both of you for what fear is telling you to do." I walked back through my front door and found her standing at the living room window. The same window I always stood at when the world got too loud. Looking out at the street with her arms folded and something heavy on her face. She turned when she heard me, and I don't know what she saw in my expression. But something in hers changed immediately. "Caleb, I need to say something," I said, "and I need you to just listen." She went still. I walked to the center of the room and stopped. My heart was doing things I hadn't authorized. "I'm not angry at you," I said. "I want you to know that first. I was, for a long time, I was. But I did the work and I let it go. Genuinely. I'm not carrying that anymore." I paused. "What I am carrying is this. 10 years of wondering what I did wrong. 10 years of asking myself what was missing in me that made you look somewhere else." Her face broke. "Caleb, I'm not done," I said gently. "You told me I was the safest person you ever knew. And then you left that. And I need to understand. Not to punish you. I'm past that. I need to understand because if you're going to be in my home, in my kitchen, in my life again, I need to know that you understand it too. That you know what you walked away from." The room was completely silent. She looked at me for a long time. Her chin was trembling. Both hands pressed flat against her thighs the way she always did when she was trying to hold herself together. And then she said the thing I had waited 10 years to hear. "I knew exactly what I was walking away from," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "That was the cruelest part of it. I knew. I knew you were good, Caleb. I knew you were real. And I was 29 years old, and I was terrified of real. Because real meant staying. And staying meant being seen. And being seen meant you could eventually decide I wasn't enough." Her voice broke fully then. "So I left first. I told myself it was because Derek was exciting. But the truth I have carried every single day for 10 years, is that I left because I was too afraid to believe I deserved you." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I crossed the room in 4 steps. I didn't think about it. I didn't calculate it. I just walked to where she was standing, and I put both arms around her, and she pressed her face into my shoulder and made a sound that was 10 years of held-back pain releasing all at once. She cried the way people cry when they've finally stopped pretending they're okay. And I held her, the way you hold something precious that you thought you'd lost forever. The rain had stopped outside. I hadn't even noticed when it stopped. But the street was quiet now, and the lamppost glowed gold through the curtain. And my kitchen still smelled like whatever she had made for dinner. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I felt something chest unlock that I hadn't even realized was still closed. She got a job offer on a Tuesday morning, senior consultant at a firm downtown. She read me the email twice. Her eyes were bright in a way I hadn't seen since she arrived. Since before she arrived. Maybe since years before that. "Caleb," she said. "I got it." "No," I said. "I never doubted you would." She looked at me across the table. "I don't want to leave," she said. Just like that. No dressing it up, no careful phrasing. Just the truth, the way she'd been learning to say it. I set down my coffee. "Then don't," I said. She blinked. "Stay," I said. "Not because you have nowhere else to go. You have somewhere to go now. You built that yourself. Stay because you want to. Stay because this is where you want to be." I looked at her steadily. "But only if that's true. Only if you mean it." The morning light came through the window between us. She stood up slowly from her chair, walked around the table, stopped directly in front of me. "I have loved you," she said carefully, "every single day for the last 10 years, even when I was with someone else, even when I was pretending I didn't. I loved you quietly, and I hated myself for wasting it." She reached out and placed one hand flat against my chest, right over the place where all the years of quiet aching lived. "I'm not asking you to forget any of it. I'm asking you for the chance to spend however long you'll give me making sure you never doubt again that you were always, always the right choice." I covered her hand with mine. "You're going to have to be patient with me," I said quietly. "I'm not the easiest man." "I know," she said, and almost smiled. "I also know you make terrible pasta." A laugh came out of me, a real one, the kind that starts in the chest and surprises you. She smiled then. A real one. The one I remembered. The one I had quietly missed for 10 years. And just like that, not with fireworks, not with dramatic declarations against a sunset, but with laughter in a kitchen and a hand over a healing heart, we found our way back to each other. People say time heals everything. But I don't believe that anymore. Time doesn't heal you. You heal you. With honesty, with courage, with the willingness to face the things that broke you instead of running from them. Nadia ran for 10 years, and when she finally stopped running, the only place left was the truth. And the truth brought her back to my door, at 11 p.m., in the rain, with nowhere else to go. But sometimes, I've learned, nowhere else to go is exactly where grace begins. There are people watching this right now who feel alone, who feel like the mistakes they've made are too heavy, who have been waiting for a sign that it's not too late to go back to who they really are, to heal what was broken, to love and be loved again. This story is for you. Here is the question I want to leave you with today. Is there something in your life, a relationship, a dream, a version of yourself that you walked away from out of fear, that might still be waiting for you to come back? Not because you have to, but because somewhere, deep down, you know it was real. Think about that. And if this story moved you, if it spoke to something inside you that needed to hear it today, please turn on the notification bell right now, because every week we bring you stories just like this one. Stories about real love, real healing, real second chances. Stories that remind you, you are never as alone as you feel. We'll see you in the next one.